The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a special board meeting here for Monday, May 24th, 2021. We'll start the meeting off with roll call. Beth, if you could help us with that, please.
Becker.
Here.
McCoy.
Here.
Leighton and Warren.
Here.
Welch.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Vanden Heuvel.
Here. 6 board members are present. Trustee Brenda Warren is excused from tonight's meeting. All right, we have 2 quick items, approval for bids for Chromebooks and the management licenses. Steve, did you want to add anything to that?
Nope, go right to Josh.
Go right to Josh. Josh, what can you tell us about these Chromebooks?
These Chromebooks are part of our refresh cycle. If you recall, in the fall, the Board of Education approved $13,500 to replace a leased allotment of Chromebooks that were due back to the leasing company that we did not own. Those were about 4 years old. The remainder of our inventory is older than that, but we own it. So we've been stretching it. This is to address that. I am hopeful that within the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to be able to get on a regular 5,500 to 6,000 device per year refresh cycle. So this is a step toward that. You'll see we received bids from 3 vendors, 4 bids total. The way the scoring came out for the Chromebooks, Camera Corner Connecting Point of Green Bay came out just barely on top by 2/100ths of a point. But we double checked the math, and that's the way it came out. They did bid a Dell model that met the minimum specifications. TRA, who we've most recently been purchasing Chromebooks from, came in second there. The reason why you see a higher point total for Camera Corner over TRA, despite having a higher bid amount, is that we advantage local vendors. So in Green Bay, it's a 5-point advantage. In Wisconsin, which TRA is, it's a 1-point advantage. So Camera Corner picked up 4 points there, and that kind of pushed them over the top. In addition to that, each of these Chromebooks requires a management license. The lowest bid there came from CDWG. So we'll be going with them for the Chromebook licenses if approved tonight.
Any questions for Josh? Go ahead, Andrew.
I just wanted to ask you to touch a little bit on, I would assume that when you come up with the bonus for the location, it's not just about supporting local business, although that's important, but there's certain advantages, I'm sure, to having your main vendor in the same, in the same town. Could you just go talk to that just a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good point. First of all, for supportability, it's pretty nice to have our vendor be 3-4 blocks away. This is a high quantity of Chromebooks, and we've asked for white glove service. So, not that we've had issues in the past, but right now, even with TRA Milwaukee, the white gloving happens down in Milwaukee. So our inventory gets shipped there. They do their thing. They put it back on a truck. Then it comes up to Green Bay. We unload it. And then we put them back on trucks and send them out to the schools. So having a local vendor should expedite that process. So there are certainly advantages to having your service providers as close as possible.
Josh, can I ask a question? This before the pandemic may have made more sense. I know a lot of districts were trying to be one-to-one in terms of district. Every student in the district has a device. The pandemic happens, we have to purchase, we have to get devices, everyone. Is it safe to say that coming out of the pandemic that our district will be considered a one-to-one or not necessarily?
Yeah, that's a good question, Eric. Pre-pandemic, if you look at one-to-one is just a ratio of devices and students, we absolutely were one-to-one within the district. We were not deployed in that way. We were deployed in a cart model at many of the lower grades, which is a very inefficient way to deploy technology actually, because you have to, you have carts of, let's say 30, and then you have a class of 28 and 30 and 32. And, so you have to kind of stock the carts for the maximum class size that is going to be using that cart. So going forward, we will be assigning every device to a student, although at some grade levels, it's possible that the device will not be going home with the student every night. They will be using the same device every day. And if we do have an emergency, again, it's going to be relatively easy to deploy those for home use.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Go ahead, Beth, or Dawn, sorry.
What is I know you had said 5,500 is going to be your refresh cycle. How long between refresh?
We'll probably skip a year on Chromebooks and then start to get into the 5,500 refresh and try to stretch this inventory through like 5-6 years to help smooth that out. Next year, so 22-23, we're talking, it's likely going to be time for our teacher laptops to be refreshed.
Can you just talk briefly about what you mean by white glove services?
Yeah, you bet. So white glove services. So if you've ever bought, if you've walked into Best Buy or something like that and bought a Chromebook, pull it off the shelf, you take it home. It's in a box. You have to take it out of that box. You have to unwrap it. And then you have to set it up to be ready to use. For use within our environment, that's also going to include tagging it with an asset tag, associating that with a serial number, getting that into a database, activating the admin license in Chrome admin, and updating the OS. So all of that is going to happen offsite, and they get repackaged into these boxes that fit like 10 at a time. They just go in little slots. So when they arrive for us, we pull the device, we pull the charger, and we're ready to go. For context, it takes our team probably about a week working nonstop to do, we did 3,000 devices in just over a week nonstop.
So basically what you're saying is that it's a substantial amount of time, which translates to money. So it's worth it to invest in these special services to help with the efficient deployment of these devices.
That's correct. It's not just the time, it's it's also the getting rid of the packaging. Having them arrive in green packaging is extremely helpful, and also a cost savings. I did want to add, there's one thing I forgot to mention. We will be receiving these before, we're guaranteed to receive these before September 1st. So by the time the next school year starts, 21-22, all of our students K through 12 will have a brand new device.
Wow. That's exciting. Yeah. All right. If there aren't any other questions for Josh, is someone willing to make the motion?
I motion that Camera Corner Connecting Point be awarded the bid for 6,500 Chromebooks for Green Bay Area Public School District in the amount of $1,943,500 as presented be approved.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All right. Beth, we're ready to vote.
Great. All votes have been entered and the motion has carried with all board members voting in favor.
All right, motion passes 6-0. Laura, you want to make the one for the licenses as well?
Sure, I motion that the CDW-G Corporation be awarded the bid for Chrome OS management licenses for Green Bay Area Public School District in the amount of $188,500 as presented be approved.
Second.
Any other discussion? Beth?
Okay, it has been opened. All votes have been entered and the motion has carried with all board members voting in favor.
All right, excellent. Motion carries 6-0. All right, then the last item for our special board meeting tonight is the committee appointments. So thank you to everyone for filling out the survey that Beth sent out last week. I spent time going over the results. You can see the attached document was sort of my best attempt to get everyone onto a committee we're interested in. You can see that we have alternates and second alternates. As a reminder, any board member can attend any committee meeting at any time, but your appointments sort of are your where you're housed and where you're closest tied to. I did make some recommendations for the chairs of each of the committees, and I guess I would, for the purpose tonight, is to just acknowledge those chairs and confirm that they're interested in chairing that committee. If not, we'll have to look for somebody else. So first, with the education committee, you can see that it is Andrew, Nancy, and Brenda are on the committee. And Andrew, would you be willing to accept the position of chair of the education committee?
I would.
Okay, thank you. Operations committee, Dawn, Laura McCoy, and Nancy. Dawn, would you be willing to serve as the chair of the operations committee?
Yes.
Thank you. Policy and governance, Laura Leighton and Warren, Brenda Warren, and Laura McCoy. Laura, would you be willing to serve as the chair of policy and governance?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And finally, the Financial Oversight Committee, Laura McCoy, Dawn Smith, and Nancy Welsh. Laura, would you be willing to serve as the chair for the Financial Oversight Committee?
Yes, thank you.
All right, excellent. Any other discussion on the committees or the appointments? All right, so I got it right on my first try. Okay, with that said, I would look for a motion to adjourn from the
We
special
need
board.
to move to approve the, accept the committee recommendations.
Oh, we weren't posted to vote. I didn't know. I thought that based upon what we said last time, that I would appoint those.
With the board confirmation, right?
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, the way that I understand it, Steve, is that each committee has the ability to set their own chair of their committee. So with 3 board members, if 2 board members want someone else to serve as the committee. So ultimately, the full board doesn't get to pick the committee. Each committee picks their own chair. In this instance, based upon Andrew's feedback last time, I just appointed who I thought would be the chair at this point. But it doesn't require full board approval. And I'm sorry, Andrew, if I misunderstood, and we could have talked about this ahead of time, but
Well, I talked to Steve about it.
And I checked in with Melissa and she said that the affirmation process was what we use for other appointments and felt that that was most appropriate to use for this particular committee appointment process.
So these are official or they're not?
They are official with Eric's appointment and with your acceptance of those roles as the chair.
For the year?
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, it's a little bit of cart before the horse, but to be able to vote, we did this first. So we will vote on it and then we'll look at the policies in our work session and we'll approve those policies on the 14th. But we wanted to have the committee structure in place so that we can start that committee work before the 14th.
So
All right.
the short answer to the question, Andrew, is yes, they're official and yes, they are for the next school year.
All right, look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, and that concludes our special board meeting. Josh, are you going to start a new stream or are we just going to keep streaming? All right. Yeah, so Megan, why don't you join us here before we get started with our work session? Good catch. Okay, give me a second. Switch over. All right, well, let's transition then. Welcome everyone to our board work session. Beth, do we need to do roll call again for new meeting? No, we're all set. Okay, so we took roll call at the start of our special meeting. Want to point out that we're also joined by Superintendent Steve Murley, along with members of his cabinet. We are also joined tonight by ICSC representative, the Vice President from Preble, Megan Jonnet. Welcome, Megan. Thank you for joining us. With that said, we'll just keep transitioning then. Open forum, we didn't have any registered speakers. Beth confirming? Yep. All right. No one registered to speak tonight. With that said, then we will go into our lengthy list of discussion items. The first is the GBAPS PK5 online school. Steve, I'll hand that to you first, and then anyone else who might present for us.
Wonderful. So let's see. I know we've got a couple people online. Vicki, are you coming up to this the table, or are we just leaving it to our online folks? I wasn't sure if you were joining us for part of that conversation. Looks like Josh is coming up too. So we've got a multi-part presentation for you today, really help bring you up to speed on the work that we're doing. And we will be joined by several folks who are online with us. And I'm not sure who's driving the PowerPoint for this. Josh has his hand up. Awesome. So I will turn it over to the two of you and those folks on the screen, and away we go.
Thanks, Stephen. As you mentioned, we are joined by others. So Adam, Claudia, if you want to go ahead and put your cameras on, we'll get to you shortly. Good evening, everyone. I am representing Nancy Schartz here tonight. She wasn't able to join us, but she's been really guiding the work for our new online school. So we are here today to give you an overview and try to respond to any questions that you might have. This evening, we're prepared to share with the board and the Green Bay community the newly designed Green Bay Area Public School District PK through 5 online learning school and the John Dewey Academy of Learning. Renee, also, if you're here, please go ahead and put your camera on. With the John Dewey Academy of Learning, we'll discuss the secondary online options for our students, but tonight the primary focus is our elementary. We're going to provide information on the why, foundational components, instructional studios, student services, and like I mentioned, the 6-12 virtual options. Thanks, Josh. The Green Bay Area Public School District online PK5 School has been developed with students at the center of the work. Over the past year, curriculum and instruction reflected teaching using traditional methods in the virtual environment. This online school will be centered on the student, along with providing multiple learning experiences through the use of technology. And there are 3 bullets on the slideshow talking about why an online school for our elementary students. We do have parent requests for virtual option in the fall. We also want to continue to, as Green Bay traditionally has done, we want to expand our learning opportunities for our students. That's something that we've historically done. And then we also want to focus on increasing student enrollment. About 2 years ago, Jennifer Agamite, the principal at John Dewey Academy of Learning, was assigned with contacting students that had left the district for virtual options. And she was able to return a significant number of students back to the district, because at that time, when they left us, they chose a virtual option and were unaware that we actually had something for our secondary students. So we know that there's need out there and desire by our families. The work on this school has several key foundational components to it. We are going to use the district adopted curriculum. We will be doing the common state and district assessments, same as their in-person peers. And we're also going to have highly trained virtual educators to be teaching our students in this program, in this school. At this time, I'd like Josh to tell us a little bit about the next couple of items.
Sure. We've been working with our partners, specifically Zoom and Poly Studios, on designing spaces to teach in. And we're thinking of these not so much as classrooms. We've been calling them instructional studios, because in this future that we're imagining, it's not like the current hybrid situation where you need to reserve a certain amount of space for students in class. You don't need to worry about kids being on-site and off-site at the same time. What you really need is a flexible environment that allows you to create high quality educational content, whether that is on a live stream or asynchronous tasks for the students. The focus should be on video production and providing flexibility in an environment to kind of rapidly transition. So we did get some initial designs back, and I'd like to share just a couple of pictures. Let me, it's on a separate page here. So this does not have all the technology in it. This has some of the components though. So you'll see that it features a green screen to easily get into video content that requires green screening. You'll see some modular furniture, including cabinetry. Because considering that this is PK5 manipulatives are important for instruction, and that does not change in a virtual environment. So that would be where the teacher can store physical items. You'll see here also a large whiteboard-ish type table. This is where a document camera would go. So you could group manipulatives on this thing and use a marker to draw around it, stream that live to your students. From the teacher's perspective, they're going to see their students up front in a gallery view. They'll have a confidence monitor that you can't see here as well. And part of what you can't see here is the deep integration with Zoom. So we're going with the Zoom rooms. So this entire room is integrated with hardware that integrates with the Zoom platform. So it turns the room into its own presentation device. So the teacher isn't worried about using their laptop to manage chat and take attendance and oh, by the way, where did my Zoom meeting go now? And, you know, all of that kind of stuff. It really takes a lot of the burden off of the instructor, lets them get into natural instruction rather than worrying about the technology getting in the way. Laura?
You said, did you say confidence monitor? What is that?
Yeah, a confidence monitor would be, it'd be a monitor that only the teacher can see, that wouldn't be visible to the students, so that they can have confidence about some things that are going on behind the scene. So imagine getting back maybe some live formative assessment data, right? You don't want that to be shown to the whole class, but you want to stay engaged through the Zoom and maybe still be sharing your screen while the confidence monitor is going to be kind of off on the side, fulfilling that function for you. Yep, I'm good.
Thanks, Josh. And it looks like Claudia was able to join us. Claudia, I'm not sure if you're prepared right now. If not, I can cover, but if you're able to, can you talk about access to services?
Yes, I can. So one of the things that I know that we're planning to do is to make sure that all students can attend the school. And because of the flexibility that we have, that we're going to be on site, have the capabilities of coming on site, we feel like we can meet the needs of all students with disabilities, no matter how significant, because what they can't get virtually, we would be able to schedule times for them to come in on site to get their occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and any additional specialized services they need. The same would go for the ELs. The needs, they would have the opportunities to come in, or so English learners, that is. They would have the opportunity to come on site for additional services as well. We will have counselor, a social worker, and a psychologist assigned to this online school, depending upon how many students enroll. So I feel we're very well positioned to be able to meet the needs of every single learner that wants to attend school virtually through the Green Bay Area Public Schools. If anybody has questions.
Thanks, Claudia. We as a district have very strong principal leaders, and starting this school is going to require that same type of strength. And we were really fortunate. Last year, I think Adam came to us. I think this is year 2. Is that right, Adam?
Finishing up year 1.
Well, finishing up year 1. Okay. It feels like 2 years. Yeah. Adam Gloderman presently serves as, and will continue to serve as, Lincoln Elementary principal. And we asked him to step up and lean in and help us lead this, and he has. So I'm going to turn it over to Adam to finish this up for us.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicki. So one of the big things that I think as we look to move forward with this online school is kind of talking about how is this different than what everybody's perception of a virtual school is right now with the pandemic, but then how is what we're offering with our GBAPS online school different than different option than other online school options that are out there right now. And one of the things, so I got 3 bullet points here that I think are really crucial. So one of the things right now that we're going to try to develop is students being at the center of the learning experiences, which we are trying to engage the student in appropriate age level content. So right now, if you think about the COVID pandemic, a lot of the time the students would log on and then the teacher would design activities based on grade level content. Now what we really want to do is provide different learning experiences for our students to ensure that they are making the progress and the growth that we want. but knowing that that looks a little bit different at each grade level from kindergarten to 5th grade. The other thing that's going to make us a little bit different is the school will have a center. And really one of the things that we believe is extremely important to a successful school is the ability to build community, to ensure belonging and provide resources and support that allow to enrich the experience. So I think a lot of times we heard going through the whole pandemic was our students are struggling because they just want to be back at school, or they don't feel like they belong, or they feel isolated. This will now give the students and the families the opportunity to belong to a bigger community as a whole. And then the last thing that I also think is crucial is that we're going to develop a process to enroll and engage families in the online learning experience so that we can really understand what the family's hopes and views and goals are for their child, but then so we can also have a really open dialogue about what is expected and how we can make sure that we are supporting each other to be successful. Josh, you wouldn't mind going to the next slide? So one of the big things as we transition here is, there is a little bit of uncertainty as we're looking to build this school, and families are looking at, do I want to continue with the online school? So one of the things I think that was really important is to kind of make some commitments that here in regards to this online school as we move forward. And so I've got 3 things here as well. I commit to creating a larger school community and a sense of belonging that is absent in other school online programs. I commit to hiring and developing a highly effective staff grounded in shared values where students are placed at the center of the work. And be a partner who believes that we can work together to have authentic conversations and design a successful learning experience for all students. Now I think turn it over to Renee to talk a little bit about JDOL.
Thank you, and good evening, everybody. Under the strong leadership of our principal, Jen Agamite, John Dewey will continue to provide a full-time online program for students who are in grades 6 through 12. One of the things that Adam had mentioned is that opportunity to be able to come in and make it more personalized, and John Dewey has done that. Students can come in, they can participate on campus courses, they can do activities at JDOL, or they can do activities at their neighborhood middle or high schools, including sporting events. Our online students each have an advisor and coach who helps guide them through their online process from the start to the finish. So if they're there from 7th grade on, that online coach and / advisor will be with them the whole time. They're the family's go-to person for all school-related questions. They go over the transcripts, they design their learning plan, they select coursework, and conduct weekly check-ins. The online advisor also helps coordinate academic and personal support from the online teachers, because the online teachers are part of the Wisconsin network. And we're in talks or in conversations with Nancy Chartier about, do we want to make modifications in the future based on how the elementary online school goes? But kids can get personal support and academic support from online teachers, from school social workers or counselors, but they can also have different options. They don't have to take all online courses. If I wanted to be a fully online student, but I wanted to do some project-based learning, which is another strong program at John Dewey, I can do that virtually with my advisor. And so I kind of get the best of both worlds there. If I would like to do some seminars, I can either come on campus or I can do those. John Dewey teaches all of their students how to, they actually call it like a seminar 101, teaches them how to work in a seminar and how to do these projects. If a student wants to take some courses at one of the neighborhood schools, maybe they're interested in automotive, or maybe they're interested in culinary, they can do those. And some of our students do the Start College Now program. So just because they're online doesn't mean they're going to be at home on a computer at all times. They could come in every day. If they want to have some questions, we have a tutor who works at John Dewey. They can be online and mix it with some courses that they're taking at another school. there's just so many opportunities, and that's the main goal of that advisor, is to personalize it for every student. There's a reason they want to be online, but we also want to give them a chance to be sociable. Maybe they want to come in for social activities. Maybe they want to come in for a family night. We just want to give them everything that they need to best suit their education. So what I included on here is just a link to the full-time online link for our website. I've also included a link to the enrollment, which does take families through a series of questions so that we can better help them decide what program is best. And then there's also a full-time online frequently asked questions that have come up over and over, either to the secretary or the principal, and we've included those in there. Very excited about getting more students who now see that they have an interest in online to see if John Dewey can be the school that can help them out. Is there any questions about any of that information about John Dewey?
Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. I have a question about the online advisors. Are those just different teachers assigned, or is that an actual position? I can see that as being a really significant key for success. Just curious what that position.
So it is a teacher, and so each of the advisories have teachers that specialize in a different core or elective specialty. So our online teacher happens to be a math teacher, and one of the things that they do at John Dewey is, as they are working on their projects, if they have a question, they can go to the advisor who specializes in that area. So if a student online had a specific question, it could be that the online advisor could answer any of them. They're all alternative ed certified, and so they could answer any of the questions. But if they felt they needed a more specialized person, they can have them go to any of the advisors who actually have a specialty or a mastery in that area. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Are there any other questions?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So if now, of course, there's people who choose to go to Dewey on premise are doing so aware that it is a project-based learning school. If someone is doing full-time online, are they able to be in something with more traditional courses, or possibly explore some of the project-based learning? Or if they wanted to explore the project-based learning, would that have to come after there was some amount of an in-person component?
No, I'm hoping I'm gonna try to answer your question, then tell me, Andrew, if I don't. So any online student can choose to take just Wisconsin Network courses, or they can mix and match. The goal is at least to get them started in a Wisconsin Network, but then see what else do they want to do. And they can do any part of their work either on campus or off campus. We do have an area where online students can go. If they just want to come in and work online, but be at JDAL, so they're by other people, that is fine too. So if they want to take one online course, let's say they really want to take a Wisconsin Network course that's in biology that they are really interested in, but they want to do a project-based, and that's going to cover maybe their math, social studies, and language arts, then they can choose to do that. And they can do that project-based either in person or they can do it virtually. So there is a huge mix of options for all of our online students.
Yeah, that answers my question. I think there's some, just wanted to make sure that any confusion was cleared up about if someone was thinking, well, 612 is being offered, but it's in the format of JDEL that people think about the project-based learning. So in fact, you could get some of the best of both worlds. You could have a very traditional looking transcript of courses as well. And then I guess my other question, unless I'm jumping the gun, is I'm hoping that there might be enough interest here that do we need to do anything with a charter modification to allow more people to do the 612, or is that coming?
Yeah,
No.
we're prepared to do that. Go ahead, Renee.
I was going to say, no, as a matter of fact, part of the expansion grant is that we're hoping to get so many more students. And so we need to continue expanding, and we're seeing the numbers change all the time. So no, we are ready to do that, and we need to do that.
I just want to add one more point, and then we can turn it back to Adam. I think one of the reasons why our secondary online school through John Dewey Academy of Learning has been so successful is because they do have that integration. Students don't have to just be online. They can actually come to the school, interact, as Renee had mentioned, with their peers and get that close community spirit. And I think that's one of the reasons why our secondary students that are online do better than most of your online classes or online schools that are offered in Wisconsin. Adam?
Awesome. So next steps, as it's been stated, we plan on being open by the fall. So we've got to do a lot of stuff here in a short amount of time. So today I was able to come in front of you and kind of communicate a little bit more about the school. So we are continuing to refine our communication plan for the school and for the district. Right now, we do have the job postings out there for our grade level teachers out on weekends. So if teachers are interested or about taking on this new opportunity, they're encouraged to go and apply for this. And we're looking to hire, depending on enrollment, in the month of June. At this time, we're really looking to, I know a lot of families have been kind of on pause of whether or not they wanted to move forward because they wanted to know a little bit more about the program and what it would look like and who would they even contact. So as we move forward here, we're going to promote and recruit students for enrollment. If students or families are interested in enrolling, they can go to the district website, and under the schools, you will find one that says GBAPS Online School. If you click on that, you will be able to go to the page that does have some information, but also a form that families can fill out to enroll, to request their child be enrolled in the online school. If parents have any questions or want to know a little bit more, there is also my contact information where you will be able to contact me directly and we can talk about a little bit more about the program. As we move over here over the next few months, we're going to continue to develop new and unique learning opportunities and experiences. Right now, teaching and learning is in the process. They have all the core kind of components out, but now putting together that professional learning for the new staff so we can ensure that they're highly effective teachers. And Josh and I and Mike Stengel are continuing to work on defining the physical space. Well, so maintaining, Lincoln as a school and as a functional school and ensuring that those students are getting the resources, but then also providing that center and community hub and learning studios for the GBAPS of learning, or the GBAPS online school as well. So we're continuing to do that as well. The next slide just has mine and Renee's contact information, but at this time, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
All right, questions for any of our presenters? Go ahead, Andrew.
I did have one more. So apologies if I missed it. As far as the location of the physical space that instruction will be out of, is that determined yet, or are they still working on that?
As far as the location will be at the same building as Lincoln. Lincoln will still function as a school. However, we do have a design that will allow the teachers to come in for those learning studios, but then also a center for the students to come in for that community building and belonging as well. And then also families to get additional support.
Okay, so there's enough space that would not displace any students or any programs?
At this time, yes. Yes, we would. Right now, the plan would be that we would keep all programs and students and faculty at Lincoln. And would also allow for room for Lincoln to grow as well.
Also, Lincoln could still grow, and it would be, Lincoln could grow, keep all the programs it has, and host all the virtual studios, and with still at least a little bit of room to grow.
I mean, obviously, all of it depends on the enrollment of the virtual students at this point. But yes, based on the initial plans that we have currently, we do have all of that figured into our facilities.
Andrew, we've also talked about, I'm going to use the word hub because that's what we've been calling it, creating hubs throughout the district so that if a family lives over on the east side, then maybe we'll have a hub at Frable so that there's easier access to them.
I just point out, because I know there's been discussion about some under enrollment in multiple schools, including, I always reverse them, Keller. I always say something else. That's probably the first time I've said Keller correctly when I meant Keller, because I always say something else, and I got it right this time. So, and among others, so I just want to make sure we want to be using our space, but if for starters it all fits in Lincoln with no displacement, then that's a good place to start.
Andrew, roughly right now, Lincoln could double in student enrollment, and we would still have enough space.
Double its enrollment plus host multiple, or do you mean that's why we can host multiple learning studios, or do you mean it could host learning studios and double its space, double its enrollment?
We could do both at this time. Right now, Lincoln has an enrollment of 120. We could go to 240.
Okay, but a virtual learning, the virtual studio, that takes away, must take away a classroom, right? Or half a classroom, or?
Yep, we have that all figured into it.
Okay.
Yep, we would have it. We would have it so that right now that there would be 2 teachers at each grade level, and the learning studio.
Adam, this is Eric. I have a couple of questions for you. As you prepare for the staffing and the hiring in June, how do you anticipate in the hiring process it being similar or different to hiring a traditional teacher for your regular classroom? What do you look for that's the same? What do you look for that's different?
Good question. So I think part of what we're going to have to look for is, someone that has some experience working with technology and working in this environment and how to reach kids in a different way. I think also we have a little bit unique is someone that's going to be okay with not always knowing and kind of developing the process along and kind of being flexible. I did have a Lincoln teacher ask me that, hey, how do I know if I'd be a good candidate? And I said, well, you'd be a really good candidate if you're willing to kind of to develop the program and be flexible, but really just put students first. I personally believe in there are some shared values that at Lincoln we work to develop, but overall that all staff must have and possess to make any successful school, whether that's in person or online. And that kind of came through this year more than ever. So we definitely look for those shared values. And then we also have to understand that it's going to be somebody that's willing to grow, because a lot of the professional development is going to happen over the summertime. So it's really flexible thinking, but then also having that strong fundamental belief in kids, that all kids can learn, that all kids are capable, and we're just providing different learning experiences to ensure that they're learning. We're trying to provide experiences that best meet the child's learning needs.
That's a great answer. Thank you. 2 other quick questions. One, what about specials in the student schedule? So will these elementary students still do PE virtually? Will they go in with a regular class? Art, music? What does that look like?
So that we're still under development, but they will definitely have an opportunity for related arts and additional experiences, such as field trips and stuff like that. Really what we're looking at is we're working with transportation to try to design calendars that would allow families, if they so choose, to come in to get some of those experiences throughout the month. Any family that does not want to, also there would have the opportunity to get those specials via online, working with those teachers as well. Also with this online program, it does also sometimes allow us to provide different art, music, and physical education experiences in a different model than necessarily the traditional gym class, art class, or music class, where students could really be immersed in their cultures or in the community and have different experiences that way as well. So really those possibilities are completely open. And it's just about now working with the community as a partnership and then trying to design the best experiences for kids.
Great. Last question that I have, and I don't know a better way to ask it, so I apologize, but in the typical day of an elementary principal, in a in-person building, I have an idea of what that looks like, and I know you do too. What do you anticipate your day looking like? What does it look like? I know you're continuing your responsibilities at Lincoln, so you're not losing that, but you're adding the responsibilities of a virtual principal. What does that look like?
Well, part of it will be to be determined. No, but here, my big thing is I believe a principal is out invisible. So, and that didn't change even when we were in the pandemic. I was in the classrooms. And so my belief is that my day will look like it will be in the classrooms at Lincoln, but it will also be in the classrooms during the synchronous activities for students as well. I believe part of that building that community and sense of belonging is being there, being visible, being present, and knowing more about the students. One of the greatest things that came of COVID in regards to this is I was able to get to know every student prior to them walking through the door at Lincoln. And as a new principal, that was crucial to the success. So what does my day look like? It looks like a principal that's out working and interacting with students, and that'll determine our success.
That's really great, Adam. Next fall, as soon as this is up and running and you've got your feet underneath you, reach out. I'd love to come and hear how it's going.
Absolutely.
All right, sorry for that. Any other questions around the table? All right. Thanks for all your work on this. I do know I've heard from around the country as other school districts are talking about coming back in person and transitioning from the pandemic. Many districts aren't offering online school in the fall at all. So definitely something that really proud of our staff that we're continuing to meet all the needs of all students. So looking forward to hearing more about that. All right, next agenda item is the Welcome Center. Steve, do you have anything for us on that?
Sure, and Mike Stengel and Pete Ross are on the line too if we need any additional questions asked or answered. And I know many of you had the opportunity to join me and take a walk through our Welcome Center. It's definitely serving a purpose as we come back to in-person in facilitating new enrollments in the district. There are some changes that we would like to make it more welcoming than it is right now. However, as you know, we're currently leasing to own, and we would propose that the board exercise that option to purchase that was part of the initial lease agreement when we initially moved into the facility. That would allow us then again to start working on some additional changes to the building that we think would allow us to better serve our students. So with that, again, the three of us are available. We'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, questions on that? Go ahead, Laura.
If we were to purchase this, what would you see as a timeline for modifications? I mean, is there already kind of do you have kind of an idea of the things that would need to be done, or will that be put together once we actually own the building?
That'll be put together. Oops, that'll be put together once we own the building. I know there's some changes that we can make in the short term. I know that one of the things, and you all saw this as you walked through it with me, we've got a few people over there. We want to make sure that for parents and families that come into the facility, that we've got everyone on site that they would need to in a one-stop shop. as they are new to the district. And so we'd make some modifications on a short term just to get those folks over there. But then some of the things that we would like to do with the facility will take a little bit more time. And obviously that's going to take a little bit of planning in order to get that done.
Steve, one of the things that we talked about when I toured the facility is oftentimes families are coming to us for assessments, testing, screening, what have you. I know that personally I've run into families who are wandering around the district office building trying to find somebody's office for a service. Sometimes language is a barrier to that. So we would anticipate this welcome center, our staff also being able to meet people there rather than having people come around our buildings. Is that correct?
Absolutely. We've talked about everything from food service to transportation, EL assessment, things like that. Really, again, that opportunity for new families to come to one place and for us to either be present or come to them while they are there going through that acclimation process.
Any other questions on the Welcome Center? All right, we will transition on in the agenda. Item C, future Board of Education meetings. So I wanted to point out that our next meeting, the regular meeting on Monday, June 14th, is when we will beginning to open up our meetings to the public again in the district office building. Individuals who are interested in attending those meetings in person can visit our district website prior to the meeting to review the COVID-19 strategies and protocols that will be in place. We will enforce masking and social distancing for our meetings. We do have to put the caveat that we can't control the number of people who come to our meetings. And so if the meeting is full, we can't guarantee that social distancing aspect. Our meetings will still be live streamed on YouTube. So people who are watching our meetings and have been will still be able to continue to do so the way that they have. Related to public comment, people will still be able to register online and call in, as well as register when they're here in person to be able to speak to the board during that public comment. So both options will continue to remain available, as will both options for attending in person. So just wanted to put that on the agenda in case any of the board members had any questions, certainly members of the public who are watching and might be anticipating that our next meeting is Monday, June 14th. Any questions from the board members on any of that information? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Laura.
My question is more about, of course, we may have as many people as can fit in the room, but I'm wondering if some of the discussion I've seen on social media has been that with the current camera, that they can't see everybody very well. I'm not sure if this has been discussed because you guys are meeting virtually and in this format before I joined, but is there an option that maybe more people would not want to come in person necessarily if they could see all of us? Has that been discussed as a possibility to each have a camera on or something technically like that could work out?
I would jump in and offer that we've had conversation about what the camera setup looks like now, what it might look like when others are in. So we could certainly take that under advisement as we look at placement and the ability to provide some of that additional focus. And I see Lori's back there. Come on up if you got some additional information to share.
So when we prior to installing the current system that we have, we used to actually pay CISA to come in and they would videotape the meetings. And so we actually had someone who produced the meetings. So it was someone who literally, we had multiple cameras around the room. He would switch from camera to camera. And then he would go back, take all of that and then create a production of the actual meeting. So when we were in talks about possibly making a change, the decision was to just put a camera in here, no longer, because CISA was no longer going to provide that service to us. And so the decision was made to put a static camera in here that just saw the entire room or saw the entire board. And so we installed that system rather than paying someone to actually come in and produce the video, if that makes sense. So that's kind of how we got to where we are.
So the other thing to point out is when we go to our committee meetings, which will start relatively soon, those will be in person, you know, smaller groups and around the community, likely not just always in this space. I know I've heard that same feedback that when we were all virtual, all of our faces were on the screen, and it was a much better experience when you're watching from home. Now you get this one angle and it's difficult to see who's speaking unless I'm moving my hands like this as I talk, which I tend to do. So yeah, something I think that they can think about.
And maybe one other note, when you think about the process that Lori was describing, that's actually then post-event. So that wasn't what you saw live on the screen. And so that's one of the challenges that we have when we're not in that Zoom environment. I appreciate you pointing that out.
Go ahead, Laura.
Would it work technically if everybody logged into the virtual meeting, had their cameras on, but stayed muted? Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Be able to see people, but just not have that feedback.
Go ahead, Don.
Well, and would we be able to do it and just not join audio? I mean, then you've got the camera, but then the audio would go through the microphones like they do today. You won't even have to keep it muted, Laura. I mean, because as soon as you hop into Zoom, it pops up and says join audio with computer. If you don't do that, then it wouldn't go through your computer. Wouldn't even have to mute it, but you would have the cameras. I think you could still do the audio, and I would ask Josh to confirm.
There's Steve.
If you look up at the screen, that's what I've got going right now, because we've got other people that are on. And so I need to monitor the audience. So I'm on. I did not join the audio when it prompted me on Zoom. So you can see me clearly on the screen there. So that would afford us that opportunity to do that.
All right. We'll play around with that. Thank you for that suggestion. Any other comments on future board meetings and procedures? All right. Moving on then, item D, handbook language and unique positions.
All right, so I think we've got a couple people that'll be speaking to that. Let's see, I know Pete is going to talk to one of the items, and I believe Tim Flood is going to talk to the other. They're both online with us. And gentlemen, I would turn the floor over to you.
Actually, Steve, thank you. It'll be more than the Pete and Tim show here. We have a number of positions. These are some of the lowest paid positions in the district, and we've come to recognize an issue across the district that needs to be addressed through a recommendation that we'll be making at the next board meeting where the board could actually vote on it, but we wanted to explain that recommendation here tonight. So Tim Flood is available. He'll talk more specifically about the event workers position, but then that led us into a larger discussion district-wide about our lowest paid individuals and trying to do what's right for those individuals. And so that involved Terry Willems as well then as Director of HR, Executive Director of HR. So she's here. And then the handbook language is something that Mike and I will address. So we'll start with Tim Flood if that's okay.
Good evening, everybody. So I started looking at the event worker compensation as over the last couple of years, it was brought up that the perception was that we had a very low end of compensation for event workers. And we also had a difficulty of finding event workers for our different schools. So what I did was I did a survey of our District 4 schools, which is our area schools in this state of Wisconsin here. And you saw the memo I sent. I won't go through every single one, but you can see that there are two different ways that the event workers are paid by the districts. One was hourly and one was by event. And we currently pay hourly. We talked about through our ABs at one of our meetings, we talked about whether or not we wanted to shift to go by event rather than by hourly. And the thought was that they wanted to stay hourly. You know, our workers know the system already. Our employees feel more valued when they're paid by the hour. Events vary by time, so it's hard to say, per event. So these are the reasons why they wanted to stay hourly. And when we looked at the different schools, we were on the lower end of the hourly paid. And when you looked at the per event, it was a mixture of everything. So it's hard to determine where we were with that. So then the next thing I did was I checked to see with Human Resources when the last time we increased our event worker compensation. The best that we could find was 2008, and we weren't really sure on that. So it's been 13 years since we've looked at event worker compensation. So the next thing I did was I looked to see where in our budget, what the impact would be. If we increased $1 per hour, we would add about $9,500 to the total district activities budget. If we added $2 per hour, we would add about $19,000 to the total district activities budget. And if we increased it to $3 per hour, we would add about $28,000 to the district activities budget. That would be for all the secondary schools. Not per school, it would encompass all of our schools. So when we looked at a 2% increase per year, starting in 2008, which was about a quarter, 24 cents per year, it came up to an increase of $3.12. So we thought about $3 or to $15 an hour as our kind of goal. So our recommendation is to raise the hourly rate of our event workers incrementally $1 per year for 3 years until it is to $15 per hour. So that for next school year, the 21 and 22 year, it would be $13 per hour. For the school year of 22-23, it'd be $14 per hour. And for the third year of 23 and 24, it'd be $15 per hour. Are there any questions?
Tim, can I ask, obviously from a budget standpoint, trying to ease this in, was there any discussion, I mean, to go from $12 an hour to $15 an hour, we're hurting for people to just make the move all at once and go right to 15? I mean, is it strictly just
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
no,
we did have discussions on that. And there are other, I'll say, employee groups that were considered. So that's why we wanted to do it per hour. Pete maybe can kind of talk more about that.
Certainly. Thanks, Tim. Tim's conversation with me is what really kind of initiated the conversation that led to more of a district-wide approach with respect to creating what I'm going to call a wage floor in the district. Some of our lowest paid workers, as you are well aware, a year ago were making $10 an hour, and we did increase that to $12 an hour at the end of the school year last year to help alleviate the extreme sub shortage that we had for clerical, aid, paraprofessional positions, so that we were a little bit more marketable. We believe $12 an hour still isn't where we need to be for that marketability. Moving to 15 would certainly be, as a wage floor, a good thing for the district to do, but we also understand that the district may choose, or the board may wish, to move in a progressive manner a year at a time by doing a wage floor increase for anyone in the district that would be represented by that lowest wage worker to go $13, then $14, and $15, so that you're not doing it all in one fell swoop, but that you are getting into a consistent pattern of looking at the lowest wages in the district on an annual basis and making sure that those are adjusted to stay current with what the market is bearing. And right now we know that trying to hire support staff subs at $12 an hour, we're not market competitive.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I just wanted to make sure that if we push to move that higher quicker to elevate that, because again, the understanding the market, just wanted to make sure there was a bigger picture there for that. So thank you, Pete and Tim. Any other questions for Tim or Pete on that?
So then for the board meeting on the 14th, there would be the recommendation coming from us that you examine a wage floor. And, you know, if you want to step it and do $1 an hour each of the next 3 years, that's our recommendation. You, of course, can do less than that or more than that. That's entirely up to the board. But we want to make sure that the board continues to take a look at the lowest paid workers in the district and try to keep that and those unique positions competitive going forward. The other thing that we wanted to talk about, and I've got Mike Stengel on the line as well, and I know Tim had said that they didn't look at event worker compensation probably for 13 years. It's longer, very likely, for the district not to have taken a look at handbook language that governs a tool allowance for a few individuals in the district, as well as a safety allowance for some of those individuals that are in particularly hazardous positions or positions that are prone to things being dropped on their feet or potentially injurious to their eyes. And so for those positions, there is some handbook language that provides some financial relief for those individuals for that safety equipment or tools that they might need for their job. And we would like to have the board, and we sent a memo to you. You know, you have it at your disposal to look at, but we would like to have modest increases to those allowances in the handbook. And Mike, I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more specific. Josh, you know, you'd be welcome to put the memo up on the screen too, if you'd like. It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, as Pete said, we have been, you know, in conversations with our maintenance and trades people for several months, and they're, you know, requesting for us to relook at what the tool allowances have been. I've been with the district since 2005, and these haven't changed. And talking to some of our tradespeople that have been around a long time, they're telling us that these haven't been updated for at least 20 years. So, and we know some of the tools that they're using, especially like our automotive mechanics and stuff, you know, their tools have gotten quite expensive, along with diagnostic equipment, electronic, you know, type tools and levels that they're using these days compared to, you know, what they had 20 years ago. We also, after looking at this, our building facility techs never received a tool allowance. Those are our building day people at our elementary schools. However, our engineers at our secondary schools did. So to be fair, they don't do the exact same work, but they do similar work. So we've added them as a line item too, that they would now receive an annual tool allowance, because they do, you know, repair light fixtures, change out lights, ballasts, repair toilets, those types of things at the elementary schools as well. So what we're trying to do is just bring this up to date more with, you know, some actual cost and inflation that they've had to deal with. And also with the safety allowance, you know, our utility people and our trades people are required to wear safety shoes, steel tip shoes, and, you know, the cost of those have gone up over the years too. So we're just trying to bring this more in line to what actual costs are for them.
All right, any questions on these numbers? All right.
So in a committee structure, you know, this would be something that Mike and I and Tim and I and Terry would bring to the operations committee for this type of discussion. And then, of course, the operations committee then would bring it to the board session where the votes would happen, but we'll prepare recommendations based upon, or I'm sorry, we'll prepare motions for you based upon the recommendations that we have going forward, and you can consider them at the June 14th meeting. But again, this would be an excellent opportunity to engage in that committee structure for these types of things.
All right. Tim, Pete, Mike, thank you very much. Appreciate the information and the updates. All right, it looks like Pete's not going too far. We've got our quarterly finance report, but I think it might be the Angie show this time.
The Angie show, and then Pete will fill in some at the end.
Color commentary.
Good evening, everybody. We also have Lisa Bynum here. She's going to be presenting the information on the CARES expenditures for the quarter, and that is actually going to be integrated in our financial quarterly report as long as we have the CARES funding. So the next few years, Lisa will be joining us quarterly as well. So she'll be after us. So first of all, like I said, we've got Q3. So this is covering the period that we're covering. You can go to the next page, Josh, on the executive summary. So these are just key points that we have, or key report assumptions that we've used for the year, and what we've been using in our projections and in our financial report that you saw last quarter as well. So none of these have changed. The only thing that has changed is the reporting period. So now we've got expenditures up through March 31st of 2021. And of course, the main focus is the general fund, or Fund 10, and then also our special education fund, Fund 27. The reason being is that these two funds make up about 85% of our district's all-in budget of $400 million. So these two funds together, about $345 million. So our focus is on Fund 10 and Fund 27. So if you go to the next page, this is, again, when I talk about all-in budget or all funds, these are all the funds that we have included in our district's budget. Some of them smaller than others, not that they aren't just as important, but again, the focus is really on the 10 and 27, because those are the ones that really hold all of our salaries and benefits for the most part, which is about, makes up about 80% of our budget. So skipping to page 4 here. So this is our revenue dashboard. So this is kind of the new format that we're going to be using going forward with the graphics. I really like how it turned out. So if you have any other graphs, or you're interested in anything else that you'd like to see, I could definitely try to incorporate this into the quarterly report. But as you can see on the top, kind of like our speedometers, that actual year-to-date total revenue. So the blue graph, what that's showing us is that as of through March 31st, I guess not as of right now, but through March 31st, we had collected about 60% of the revenues that we projected or budgeted. So we're running a little bit under of what we projected slightly, but that's okay, because our expenditures, as we'll see on the next page, are also running slightly under, and that's exactly where we want to be. We're right on track. When we talk about, so that red graph, that actual year-to-date local sources, what this is it's our property taxes. So through March 31st, we had collected about 64% of our property taxes. And being that we get 3 collections. So we collect in January and February, and then again in August. So what happens in the school district world or financial world is we'll book back a receivable to recognize that revenue, but we actually don't see the cash until August. So that's why we've only collected 64%, but when we close the books in June or July, we'll book back that revenue, and then that will be 100%. So the 72 million that we budgeted for. And then if we move to the purple graph, this is showing our year-to-date state sources, which is our equalized aid. So our district is funded about 60% by state equalized aid. So as of March 31st, we collected about 67% of our aid. So together, the reason why these two are highlighted, so our property taxes and our state aid, that's because about 85% of our revenues come from these two sources. So if you look at the box, like the top 10 sources, those are really all of the large revenues that we receive in Fund 10 and Fund 27. But again, the equalization aid and the property taxes are, of course, the most significant. And then some of the graphs below, really just a different way to look at what those speedometers are on top. So if we go to the next page, we'll talk about expenditures. Again, like I had mentioned, so if we're looking at the blue graph, these are the total expenditures that we've spent through March 31st, and that is about 59%. So again, we're slightly under what we were projecting, but we're slightly under in revenues as well, so we're right on track. The actual year-to-date salaries and benefits. So salaries and benefits make up about 70% of the all funds or all expenditures. So very significant part are human capital of this budget. So as of March 31st, we had spent about 67 or 68% of salaries and benefits. And then if we jump over to the purple graph, all other objects were at about 41%. So again, by far salaries and benefits make up a very large part, and then coming in, at third is our contracted services, and that really makes up about 85% of our budget, and then everything else is, supplies and things like that. So looking at, if you then again look at that expenditures by object, so the graph that's right on top there on the right, expenditures by object, this compares our prior year to date, and then our current year to date. So again, very consistent from where we were in the prior year and right on track. So the next page is really just kind of the financial summary of what we just went through. So if you focus on the second box on the right, so the current year to date and the annual budget, these numbers over the year-to-date percent of budget, the 64.13%, that will match up with what you saw in the previous slides on our dashboard for revenues. So this is kind of just, again, just a summary, a different way to look at it. We're, again, projected out 59% or about 60% of the budget has been spent and revenues have been received. So yeah, I feel good about where we are. Now, as we head towards the end of the year here, so June, this is where things start to pick up a bit. So we do a very thorough projection every month. So this quarterly report really summarizes what we're doing on a monthly basis. And we really start to project starting in November after we certify the budget. So with our projections, now is the time that we start to take a look at where we're going to end up. And in July, we start to do that year-end activity to really maximize the position for the district's aid, the state aid that we receive. So all of the activity that we do at year-end and when we close the books, the auditors will then come in and review all of that activity, and then we'll report out to the board later on next year. So for the 2021 budget. So I'm going to end it there. I'm going to ask if we've got any questions, and then I'll pass it on to Pete to just kind of do the summary of what the governor's proposed state budget is, and kind of maybe the changes that are taking place and what it might look like. Probably our guess is as good as yours at this point, but at least we know what he's proposing. So I'll pass it on to Pete, but does anyone have any questions?
Doesn't look like any questions, Angie. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Angie. Josh, I don't know if you could throw that back up again for the last page. The board obviously has a copy, but for reference for anybody watching, I can speak to the provisions in the budget that are currently being discussed. I got to tell you, you got a diamond in the rough with Angie, but she's no longer the diamond in the rough. She's the real deal. There is no better person knowledgeable about Green Bay Schools finances and positioning the district than anyone in the state. Angie can hold her own ground with any of the best finance people in the entire state, and she knows this district inside and out. She's doing a phenomenal job. Just today, we were discussing the fact that she'd like to bring the auditors in, which is something that hadn't been done in the district for some time. To have the auditors do reports to the board at the end of their audit cycle. So you have the full disclosure from the auditors themselves about all of the things that the district is doing with respect to finances. Angie's running a top shop. She's doing a great job. All right, the one thing that I do want to talk about with respect to the governor's budget summary, the Joint Finance Committee is going to take up the budget and ESSER spending and funds that are available to elements of the state of Wisconsin's entities on May 27th. So that's this week. They'll begin the deliberations. I think all of these bulleted points are still in the works. Some of the more important ones I put first, or we put first on this report, but certainly that key proposal of $200 per student increase for the general revenue limit formula would be great. I'm not sure if it's going to come as direct aid or if it's going to come as revenue limit increase. You know, this district is at the bare minimum in terms of the revenue limit authority provided by the state of Wisconsin. We are a low spending district. And we were allowed to go up to a ceiling of 10,000 last year. This would give us a ceiling of 10,200 and then 10,400 in each of the successive years of the budget. It would be important to have that increase. It's not quite inflationary, but it certainly is close to what inflation is running. As you well know, it's very modest. Another key proposal that the governor had out there that I still believe is in the works and being discussed is the ability to either use the 1920 enrollment data or the 2021 enrollment data, and that will help to mitigate any of the downturn in the enrollment that the district had as a result of the COVID crisis that we've been going through and hopefully are coming to the end of very quickly. Having that revenue authority based on either one of those years or taking the highest of the 2 years would help in that 3-year rolling average and help mitigate any financial issues with the district. The third bullet is one that I think is probably the most important one in my book. Wisconsin's reimbursement rate for special education is one of the lowest in the country, if not the lowest in the country. Right now, the state of Wisconsin reimburses public schools at a rate of about 25% for their aidable costs in special education. We transfer about $31 million out of Fund 10. That's our general fund where we could spend on, whatever it is that we want to spend on for educational services for our children. We transfer that to Fund 27 to help cover the costs of special education. If the governor's proposal last biennial budget had been achieved, where he was going to get a 45% aidable reimbursement the first year and then 50% the second year, our district would have been able to save in Fund 10 and use other resources for providing educational services, $8.5 million the first year and $9.3 million the second year. So getting to 50% aidable cost is a huge deal for this district. It would decrease our Fund 10 transfer to Fund 27 and will allow the district more flexibility to spend on other educational services in the general educational programming of the district, like creating an online school and things like that that we're contemplating. Having that reimbursement rate would put us back into the average of what's going on in the United States with respect to reimbursement, not being one of the lowest in the country. That's an important consideration, and I hope that the state legislature takes that up. There's also some funds that the governor has requested to put in for mental health coverage, $46 million. I know $46 million seems like a lot of money. But when you're talking about all the school children served in the state of Wisconsin, hiring nurses and psychologists and counselors, $46 million it would be spent wisely, but also spent quickly. We are a low revenue limit district. So the next bullet down is the governor's proposal to have the low revenue ceiling changed to 90% of the state average expenditures. Okay, so think about that. We are a low spending district. We are by statute able to spend up to 87.3% of the average. So we're not spending at the average, we're below the average. That's the low revenue limit ceiling that we're allowed to go up to. If we could go up to 90% of the state average, we're still below average, but it would be additional resources. And that's one way to inch us closer and closer to the average state expenditures. $204 million to expand internet. We would desperately, the whole state would need that. We have to be able to have the infrastructure to provide educational services in a modern setting. You know, I suppose years ago, roads and bridges were extremely important for commerce. Today, the internet is extremely important for commerce. It's also important for education. And having all of our children have appropriate access to high-speed internet services at their homes is something that is now part and parcel of what we do for education. This pandemic taught us that. This pandemic taught us that we as a society weren't there yet. And the district has spent a lot of resources getting kids hotspots and Khajiits so that they could continue to do their work in an online capacity. Again, internet is, you know, kind of like years ago, roads and bridges. It's what's needed in commerce. It's also what's needed in education. The last part of the report then, Angie, I'll turn it back over to you if you want to go into the last part. That'd be great. Thanks.
Sure. So Lisa Bynum should be joining us. If you want to just turn your camera on, Lisa. So again, Lisa will be presenting the quarterly third quarter claims for CARES funding, and then probably going through a little bit of information. There's, I think, like 4 documents. So Lisa, if you just want to just let Josh know which ones you want up on the screen first, and then he can just pull those up for you. Thanks, Lisa.
Yes, thank you. The purpose of the report that I'll be doing following Angie's quarterly report is really a monitoring and reporting out on the spending of ESSER grants. I believe Superintendent Murley shared a document previously that explained the 3 different ESSER grants. So that what we're reporting out on tonight is ESSER 1, which is the CARES Act. And under the CARES Act, there was ESSER and GEAR, and those are both being referred to as ESSER 1. The DPI is requiring quarterly claiming of all stimulus funds. So that requirement is beginning with this next fiscal year, but we've been following that claiming calendar. So for instance, the most recent claim was the March 31st claim, and that claim would represent any expenditures made by December 31st. So there is a there. So when we talk about the claim, we're not talking about money that was spent, you know, a few weeks ago. We're talking about money that was spent about up through 3 months ago. So there is a little bit of a delay there. So we've actually spent more than, obviously, than we've claimed to this point. Josh, if you could bring up the document that's titled ESSER Expenditures. And this will look similar to a document that Superintendent Murley showed to you previously. So the top portion is the 3 different ESSER grants. And right now we're spending on ESSER 1 and some basic information. And then below this is allowable activities, allowable spending under these 3 grants. And then we added a section to the end. So Josh, if you could scroll all the way to the end of this document. Right here. So here is where you will see what has been claimed so far. We have this organized by program type because in WISE grants, this is how the grants each grant application is organized, and these are the areas that you can spend under. So for ESSER 1, you'll see that so far we have claimed funds under preparedness and response to COVID-19, addressing long-term school closure, and educational technology. And then we also have there the amount that's been claimed so far for private schools. So this is kind of that high-level document that over time you'll be able to see what's been claimed for each ESSER grant and under which programs it's been claimed. If you could then, Josh, go to CARES Act claim ESSER grant. This is going to give you a more detailed look at how the funds that have been claimed so far have been spent. So it is again in that left-hand column, you will see that it is listed by program type. So you will see either preparedness in response to COVID-19, addressing long-term school closure, or educational technology. And on this document, you're going to get more detail. So you'll get a description of what it was under that program type and how much was claimed on each of the claim dates so far. And the other two documents, I'm not going to have Josh pull these up because there's just not a lot of information on them at this point. One of them is the gear claim to date, and all that really has on it is what's been claimed so far in gear for the private schools, because we haven't done any claims yet for the public schools under gear. And then there's another document that just gives you the totals claimed in the ESSER 1 grant under each of those program types, the addressing long-term school closure preparedness and educational technology. So with that, I will open it up to any questions you might have.
A lot of information, a lot of numbers there. Anybody have any questions on any of that information? Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate that, and look forward to those updates every quarter.
Thank you.
All right, moving on our agenda, we are on item F and new secondary courses for 22-23, and Vicky's back.
Hi, thank you. Each spring, the Teaching and Learning Department proposes new secondary courses to be added to the middle school and high school course books for the following fall. If approved, the courses described below on the memo will be included in the course book for the 22-23 school year, and students would be able to register in fall of 21. The two proposals are IB Chemistry. West High School currently offers the IB diploma program in science for biology and physics. The addition of chemistry will allow students who are interested in the subject or need the course for their post-secondary plans the option within the IB diploma. The other request is for English language development. The English Learner Department, under the leadership of Julie Seefeld, is working on having middle school students who are new to the country take the universal grade level English language arts courses. Currently, students are enrolled in a separate 2-period English language arts course. Instead of the separate course, students will enroll for 1 period of English language arts 7 or 8 and 1 period of English language development.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So West is not very big student enrollment, so it's probably unlikely that AP and IB would both run, or is there a commitment to run them both even if they're small?
My understanding is that we would run both. We will have to look at numbers, of course, to see enrollment and make decisions accordingly.
Okay, if you know, I think that the board passed the board for math, I think made a commitment to run the traditional, it's not exactly apples to apples, but to run the traditional pathway and offer the integrated pathway. So, you know, I think it's an important option unless we were able to show, you know, clearly that the IB chemistry would have all the topics of the AP, because AP is a good option for some people who are maybe not, you know, doing the IB diploma, or maybe don't want to do all of their science IB, but want to be able to take that test. Then I had one more, unless someone else.
No, go
Okay.
ahead.
So students who are new to the country taking the universal grade level English language, we would have, I would imagine we would have students coming into the country, new to the country, that have anywhere from knowing almost no words of English up through, you know, some working up to perfect fluency in English. Obviously, we'll have, you know, that for that whole spectrum for students new to the country. They may well have studied English and be very strong in it. So is that going to work for people who maybe are at the extreme beginning of their, I mean, are they going to be lost maybe if they are at what we, you know, used to call, or maybe still do if we still have the levels, but a level 1 or 2 or equivalent?
Andrew, what we've discovered is the more we isolate students that aren't familiar or have the first language of English, the more we isolate them, the less experience they have in actually speaking the English language. Although I'm not an expert in this area, I believe that's what the focus is of offering this. We don't want to put a student into any position where they don't have the ability to be successful. So I would suspect that Julie and her team would do an evaluation and provide appropriate interventions depending on the student needs.
I mean, conceptually, it's great. I'm just, and immersion is good. And it works. I'm just, like I said, a little bit worried about the, you know, if someone was so new to the English language that they don't yet have the knowledge even to navigate a class. In general, I'm glad to see kids together in the same classroom. It's just that, you know, you're also jumping into ELA 7 or 8, which has obviously built on a more of a knowledge of English than, you know, jumping into language arts 1st or 2nd grade if you're of that age. So thank you.
All right, any other questions? Go ahead, Dawn.
Vicky, is the IB chemistry, that's 2 years, like physics and biology?
It's a great question. I'm going to look. I'm pitch hitting for Nancy tonight, so I will do my best to respond. I might have to get back to you on that, Dawn.
I'm assuming it is. I had a kid who would have loved to have taken IB chemistry if it had been offered, so it's super exciting.
All right, any other questions for Vicky on those 2 courses? Thank you, Ms. Beyer. Oh, Oh,
Yeah, you're not done with me yet.
Yeah, I'm not done. Oh, I was like, wait,
Sorry.
I thought we went through both courses. You meant the next one, like the next agenda item.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you. We are requesting the allocation of funds and approval for expenditures related to the adoption of high school English language arts and secondary science curricular resources. As part of the secondary curriculum renewal process, it was determined these requested adoptions are necessary in order to provide students with instructional materials that support the rigor found in the state standards and the district learning outcomes. I did ask Nancy today to provide me a little background information on how these resources were determined. And really glad to hear that equity lens was placed on the materials, as we'll be moving forward with any instructional materials that we purchase. In addition, students played a role. Each high school principal identified some students to have an opportunity to look at the materials and give the okay, thumbs up or thumbs down. So the material requests presented to you today, the students were in support of as well.
Any questions on the curricular adoption? Now we're done. Thank you, Vicki. Sorry about that. All right. The rest of our agenda, lucky us, is filled with lots of policy updates. And so we are joined by Melissa Thiel-Collar. Melissa, you and I can just tag team. We'll jump through the rest of the agenda as we take each of these policies that you're bringing forward for us again for discussion tonight. So we'll start with H, telecommuting. The little face that's talking.
Okay, there we go.
Vicki broke it.
Technical difficulties. Thank you, Eric. So tonight we're bringing forward to revisions to policy 531 telecommuting. The board adopted this policy in December of 2019, and about 3 months later, the COVID pandemic hit. So we were ready for it, but we had no idea what telecommuting was going to look like during the COVID pandemic or any pandemic, because no one had ever anticipated that happening. As we worked through providing virtual work for our employees, we learned a lot along the way, and we learned where we needed to fill in gaps and make better, clear policy for our employees, and also where we could be a little bit more flexible. So we're bringing forward to you tonight revisions to the telecommuting policy based on lessons learned over the last year, as well as where we can be provide better flexibility to our employees and provide more nimble work environments in certain circumstances.
So Melissa, this policy was drafted without knowing anything about COVID. We go through COVID and essentially then looked at this policy and said, hey, some of this stuff needs to.
Yeah, for example, the policy was pretty strict on who would be eligible for telecommuting. And we knew that there are going to be those one-off situations. Think of your water heater going out. And we have employees, not every employee can work from home, but now that we have those capabilities, we have the technology, we have the infrastructure. In the past, if your water heater went out, you had to take a day of vacation. There was no ability to work from home, but there are employees who are able to still perform all the functions and duties of their job while they sit at home while the plumber's in their basement changing out their water heater. So this policy provides that flexibility, but it also talks about long-term regular work through a telecommute arrangement where you are working off-site for the majority part of your job in an alternative location. And we never imagined that could ever happen here before the pandemic.
All right, any questions on the telecommuting policy? All right, thanks for making those updates. Next is naming of facilities. This one's fun.
Yes. So we have had a number of changes in the district with respect to facilities, with respect to really kind, generous community members who have wanted to make donations to then have a building or a small room or auditorium named after them within a facility. And our donations policy does sort of address that, but it didn't provide very specific language around naming of those facilities. We have consolidated 2 schools in the last year and a half, and we're looking at opening a virtual school that we haven't done in the future. The last school that we created, I'm not sure if Frable was first or Da Vinci, but we've had 2 schools open since I've been here, and we had a very outdated policy on how we name those schools, including contests at an elementary level that probably really doesn't help with the process of naming a school. So we need to bring that policy up to date. It's still in that old alphabet series policies, and we need to get an up-to-date version and be able to provide a better area and forum for the community to be able to have that input, as well as the board to be able to look at what the community is offering for naming of those schools.
All right, questions on the naming of facilities policy? Andrew?
Yeah, so, well, I understand it's not the be all and end all, and certainly other sources are needed. We had something kind of special and unique with the 5th grade naming contest. I guess I don't see why we would have to shed that tradition, provided that there's other avenues of input. And in the old policy, the board had final say too. I'm just wondering why that couldn't continue to be part of it's quirky, but it's, you know, something that's unique. Probably a unique Green Bay thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If no one else cares, I'll drop it. But I'm not saying instead of any of these things, but couldn't you run the contest and still seek the other input?
I think the way that the policy is drafted, the committee could develop any sort of mechanism they want to seek that input. And if it's appropriate, they could seek the input from a 5th grade contest. But this policy does have students sitting actually on the committee. And so that may be of more value versus a contest that kids participate in. I think that could be up to the committee.
Well, if it's up to the committee, then you're, you know, like I said, this is not that big of a deal. But if it's up to the committee on whether or not to have a 5th grade contest, if it's an elementary school, then it's no longer part of our policy. So the tradition isn't upheld. But again, students participating is what's more important. So I just pointed out because it's a kind of a unique traditional feature that we had that probably other places don't.
Andrew, historically, would it be all 5th graders across the district, or how would you?
I think any 5th grade classroom could submit.
I'm sorry.
Right, if it was going to be an elementary school, then any 5th grade class could enter and submit a name, right?
Yep, I have the mimeographed copy here. Elementary schools will be named by conducting a contest in all 5th grade classrooms in Green Bay Area Public School District. And then eligibility is determined as follows. Any 5th grade class in the Green Bay Area Public School District, whether in a combination or straight grade, only one name will be accepted from any one classroom listed in the rule. So you had a contest and then the class submitted one name from that class. And then contest rules are distributed and collected by the administrator. They have to have the name of the school, the name of the teacher's classroom, the choice of the name, and the reason for selecting the name, limited to 150 words. And then that's evaluated by the facility naming committee. And then where elementary school and park sites have been established, a winner has been selected. A joint announcement will be made by the board and the park committee of the Green Bay Common Council. So this is pretty old.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, as long as there's students on the committee and we're finding ways to get student input, that's what I'm fine with. I don't know if anybody else wants to. Go ahead.
I think it would be the fifth graders. I think this is a way to engage students in the process. I wasn't aware that that was the process in the past until we talked about naming the virtual school. But I think it would be kind of fun to for students to remember that process and maybe their name was picked or not picked. But I think the main thing is that students are involved in it. So I can see either way being a good thing.
Okay. Anyone else on that policy? All right. Couple policies on the virtual school. Keep going.
All right, so we heard the presentation tonight on what that amazing opportunity is going to be for our students. So we have an accompanying policy really to help facilitate the selection of students for the school, and as well as the district's obligations, parent and student rights and responsibilities in that school. So we're bringing forward to you tonight the policy for the virtual school, as well as the rule that would accompany the administration implementation of that policy. The reason for a separate rule on the virtual school is this is not a charter school. So the charter school policy and rule would not apply to the school. This is a district school and not created under the charter school statute.
Melissa, can I ask where you begin when someone says, hey, you need to draft a policy for virtual school? What do you do?
So this one was really interesting because most virtual schools in Wisconsin are charter schools. And so all those charter school policies apply. We are lucky that we adopted board docs for housing our policies because they have a great feature in board docs itself where we can search every single policy of every single school district that uses board docs across the entire United States.
Wow.
So we were able to find some samples beyond Wisconsin that helped us in drafting this, but WASB is also a really good resource too.
Okay.
And I have to give credit to my team. Ellen and Heather are really great at helping when we have to pull these policies together.
Was there anything in this policy? I mean, I glanced through it and didn't see anything that you found to be abnormal or special about a virtual school policy. I mean, obviously a lot of it is different because it's for a virtual school, but anything that struck you or anything that's...
I think what's unique about this, and because it's not a charter school, is there is no attendance area school. And so we needed to make it clear how students are admitted into the school. We're going to use the inter-district transfer process to be admitted into the school. You heard from Claudia that students who have IEPs are eligible to attend the school. Make sure that's clear, that it's non-discriminatory to any student on any basis that the district has in our policy, as well as, but also recognize what the parent and students obligations are, and that they have this is a privilege. It's not a right to attend this virtual school. So what on their end of the bargain too, that they have to hold up in order to continue their attendance.
Any other questions on the virtual school policy or the virtual school rule? Did you want to go through that one separately? We can do.
No, we can do it.
Okay, yeah.
Together. You'll have to vote on them separately.
Sure,
That's why they're listed
absolutely.
separately.
The policy or the rule for the virtual school. All right, let's go to L, regular and special meetings of the school board. We talked about this a little bit last time.
Yes. So since we have now people populated on the committees, I'm assuming that we're moving forward with the creation of the committee structure. So there were a host of policies that need to be revised in order to facilitate the creation of that committee structure. So we have revised, I want to start with policy 170 and rule 170, because I think that provides the skeleton for this. And then the other policies are really behind the scenes policies as well that just needed to be updated. So policy 170 addresses the creation of those committees, how they will be structured and how they will be filled. And then policy 170 is then the procedures for that standing committee, what the postings will be required to look like, how vacancies are filled if a board member no longer serves on the school board, the duties of the committee chairperson, the scope of the committees. It's each committee has a definition of their scope and what will be assigned to them. And then if there's a disagreement about whether a particular topic should not be assigned to a committee, how that would be resolved. And then it ends with, again, the description of how those meeting postings are going to look like. In this policy, as well as policy 187 revisions, makes clear that there is a public participation portion on the agenda. So there is going to be a time for public to comment, just like a regular board meeting or a work session. It also outlines that board members who are not members of the committee are able to attend, but they have the same rights and responsibilities as a member of the public to participate, because otherwise you're essentially just going to have a board meeting if every board member is going to have the same ability to comment, have input in the agenda and those sorts of things. So it's really the role of the members of the committee, and other board members can attend, but you're attending as a member of the public. That's how I believe the city committee structure works too with the city council.
Laura?
Steve, can you refresh my memory? When we talked about this at our last meeting, did you say that there was a potential for an issue to move through multiple committees if needed?
It could very well do that as the board determines where the area of appropriate focus is. So you might have something that begins as an operations issue, and then it might require some policy revision. So you might make a reference to the policy committee for that.
That's sort of what I was thinking as you were talking, that you might, it might be crafted somewhere, but end up needing to go through the policy committee in the end as well. Thank you.
Go ahead, Andrew.
That again brings me back to my question of last week, which is, it doesn't, if it's not policy, it's not binding. So doesn't that mean that you're giving the policy governance committee final authority on everything? Because if it doesn't go into policy, it's not binding.
I might use the telecommuting one that you just looked at as an example. So the operations committee through personnel might look at it and come to the group and say, here's some things that we think have changed substantially during the pandemic, some things that we would like to see put in place moving forward for a policy that would allow us more flexibility in telecommuting. We would like to see a policy that does these 6 things. And therefore, then that would be referred to the policy committee. They would take that structure and then craft it into the policy for board adoption. So the intent isn't for the policy committee to overrule anything in either of the other committees, but simply to take it and codify what those committees have already approved.
Okay, so it'd be a recommend sending something over to another committee with instructions. Or could be.
And actually, it'd be more along the lines of in that case, the operations committee would say, this is the policy we want. We would work with the members of that, the administrative members of that committee would work with Melissa, draft that policy, then run that policy as written through the policy and governance committee, just like we're doing it tonight. So then they would have that ability to review it, make sure that it complied with those provisions that were provided by the operations committee, and then forwarded to the board for action.
Right, and then still at the end of the day, there's 3 board members on any committee, so there still could be a possibility that it doesn't come to the full board and get approved.
Well, and as first noted in the policy 170, the committees have no ability to take action. Only the board can take action. So 3 members of a committee can write a policy, 3 members of a committee can ask for policy to be rewritten, but the only adoption of that policy will be here at the board meeting, and not by 3 members, but by the majority of the board.
Sure. So I'll go ahead, Andrew.
I guess if you were going to that point, my other question is different.
No, I wasn't going to that point. I was going to say something else unrelated.
Okay, so I still don't like, I still don't understand what makes so based on this policy, then the board president's list is official. I mean, it's not even, I mean, the board, not that I think the board president would, but we don't know who the board president will be indefinitely into the future. Shouldn't the board have to approve that in case, who knows, in the future, the board president acted in a way that the board didn't like for the committees?
So the language of the rule says that the chairperson will be designated in the committee appointment process after consulting with the full board. The first named person on the board president's list of the appointees for each committee shall act as the committee chair, and the second named person shall act as the alternative chair. There's language in the policy about the removal of the board president as well. So if the board was unsatisfied with the way that the board president had appointed the committees and the committee chair people, that certainly could happen. The other committees that the board has, so for example, the delegate to the WASB convention, the delegate to CISA, those are not made by a board vote. Those are really done working with the board president and at a board meeting, and no official action is taken on those either.
So I would just say, obviously, work session here, a lot of different policies and information for us to review for this work session. We're going to vote on these policies on the 14th. I would just encourage everyone to really look through this policy and all of these related to those sessions. If you have any feedback or questions or suggestions between now and June 14th, to make sure we reach out to either Steve or Melissa, get those questions answered, because when we adopt this policy, it'll then impact how we and change how we have traditionally done our work. Hopefully in a better way, a way that simplifies things, allows us to dive into complex issues, allows us to get more feedback, bring more people to the table. There's a lot to like about it, but it is going to be different. And this policy certainly establishes that. So I would just ask to make sure that all board members are really familiar with this, as it will hopefully help us to be more effective moving forward.
And even if you could communicate with me prior to the meeting and you have an idea of what you want the language to look like, I can draft that, recognizing you'll have to propose it at the board, but it's a lot easier to draft it ahead of time than when we're sitting here at the board trying to draft policy.
Yeah, so if you have any questions or suggestions or want something to be different and you can communicate that before the 14th, then people have time to digest it before we take a vote. Obviously, we want to approve the policy so we can get started on this work.
Any other questions on 170 rule or policy?
Well, actually, yes. Okay, so I know we talked about this last week, the idea of, is it valuable to perhaps just say there's always going to be a work session and just sometimes it would be short. Steve had said that it was probably likely that we would need one many of the months. And although I understand that there are public input opportunities in the committee, the work session and the regular board meetings start with that open public forum, which I think is important to preserve. And that there would be, if the work session is always held, there is that guaranteed open forum, 2 times a month, spaced 2 weeks apart. If the work session is optional, that takes away that open forum opportunity, which I think is important and reasonable to have twice.
My take on this, Andrew, is we're now adding 3 more opportunities for open forum. Each of the work sessions have open forum. So we're going from 2 opportunities to 4 opportunities.
Well, if they have open forum, that's okay, but I just heard public participation. So public participation could have, I didn't know if that was public participation on agenda topics or if they're open forums.
Open forum.
Okay, well, then we're fine.
Yeah, I mean, to me, if one of the committees gets to a point in their work that they're like, hey, we need all the board members to talk and work through this, then that committee would recommend, hey, we need to have a work session. If there's not a recommendation from one of those three committees, well, or four committees, I mean, if there's a finance issue, then we wouldn't. And so that to me is what would determine whether or not that work session would happen. You know, over the course of the summer, you know, given the work and the draft agendas that I've seen, I can't imagine that there's going to be a need for a work session in July. I could be wrong. As we get into some of the heavier items that we know are calendared throughout the year, it's probably likely that they come back, but unless a committee is requesting that, that will kind of be the determination. Go ahead, Laura.
So just to clarify, in these committee meetings, there'll be open forums, and can people talk about anything? Or does it have to be pertinent to the work of that particular committee?
It will be the same rules as at the current work session and current regular board meeting. People can talk about, they have their 5 minutes to talk about the item of their interest. The board cannot engage in dialogue with that individual, just the same as it is with the work session and the regular board meeting. And then the board can assign that to an administrator to get back to that individual, or then have further dialogue at a different board meeting where they can put that agenda item on a committee meeting or a board meeting. Same process will apply.
Okay, thank you. I assumed that they would just only be able to speak on whatever's that committee was working on. So, all right, thanks.
However, if that topic is relevant to what they're talking about, and then the board gets into that agenda item and they want to engage that person in part of that conversation, they can do that.
Yep, they can do that.
Yeah. So if you're there talking about dress code and somebody stands up during the open forum and talks about dress code, and then you get into the conversation about dress code, you can say, hey, that Mrs. So-and-so who came to address us, come and be a part of the conversation. All right, any other questions on that? All right, Melissa, are we 151?
151. So 151 was revised. We revised the name of the policy to clarify the applicability of the policy is to board policy. For some reason, it was just named the adoption, revision, maintenance, and dissemination, and of board policy had been left off for some reason. So we just wanted to clarify that. Clarified the title for district legal counsel. We revised the policy drafting procedure to reflect that the policy modifications will be presented at the Policy and Governance Committee rather than the work session, and then forwarded to the Board of Education at the regular Board of Education meeting. So just made that one change to where the policy will first be referred.
Okay. Pretty straightforward. Any questions on that one? All right, 171.2.
Yep, 171.2, just a real simple renaming of the policy to reflect that the policy applies to the preparation of agendas for regular board meetings and work sessions, because the procedures of 170 has the language with respect to how the agendas are set for the committee meetings. So the agendas aren't going to be set by the president and the superintendent for the committee meetings. It will be the chair and the administration liaison, versus the work sessions and regular board meetings are more structured around the board president and the superintendent, with the language is not changed at all, with the board member's ability to request an agenda item. Simply, the policy was just renamed. So everything, the contents of that policy are the same.
Steve, that reminds me, so the creation of our board meeting agendas, once these committees are up and running, will it be a process where the committee chair and or the admin chair would reach out to you or I and say, hey, we would like this added to the board agenda?
Yes, so as committees work through their the tasks in front of them and they're ready then to come in front of the full board, they'll submit a request saying that they would like to have that particular item added to the agenda.
Okay, and that'll usually be for action.
Yes, it could be, to be honest with you, it could be anything. I mean, they could have hit a wall in the process and they could want to bring it to the board for more discussion, or they could be ready for action for it.
Okay. All right, another policy update just relevant to our committee structure. Anything, any other questions there? All right, 187.
Yep, 187 is the policy on public participation in school board meetings. That's why I referred to it as public participation and not open forum. But again, just clarified that that public participation will be allowed in those committee meetings.
All right, another update there. And then I assume the next one, 441.1 student government.
Yes, so the policy has been revised to permit student representative participation in the standing committee meetings. In addition to that, the policy 170 and rule 170 also reflected that the ICSC student council representatives would be allowed to participate in those standing committees. So that is the language of the policy. And then the rule was revised to include as a duty of the faculty advisor to provide opportunities for student representatives to be present at those standing committees. And the revisions also included that ICSC is entitled to 2 non-voting seats on standing committee meetings, and that the council should assign 2 students to attend those standing committee meetings.
Okay. So rather than a rotation for ICSC, it would be a appointment of 2 consistent people?
That's what the language right now reads, the appointment. So they've developed a rotation. I think that's how they then have fulfilled that language of the appointment.
Okay.
It talks about the president and then another member being allowed to attend.
Okay. Go ahead, Andrew.
I can share some details in email or we'll talk, but I think there could be a case where you may have 1 or more student reps on the committees not be an ICSC member. I think you would look to ICSC first, but for example, we do have the situation where the president or an officer is at all of the board meetings, and then we rotate 1 member through. That historically had 2 purposes. One was to make sure that there would always be 1 student in case something happened, and the other one being that to give the consistency of the president, but also give all voices a chance to be heard at the board table. It's possible that with the way the committees are structured, if there's a desire to have more of the same people there, you may not find the right person or the right number of volunteers in intra-city student council. So I think I would rather that say something, and we'll talk about it, something like making provisions for student representation that would be in consultation with intra-city student council or something like that. The example that was given last week was that perhaps the policy and governance committee, you may have the right people in intra-city student council that would do it, but it's kind of maybe a specific interest for someone looking to maybe a student going into law or something. So I just want to make sure the opportunity is there to have the student reps look to ICSC, but also there might be a situation where there was a good reason to have a different student rep on committees. I think the board meeting rule should stay the same.
Megan, can I ask you an ICSC question? So one of the things in our committee structure was to move some of those meetings from a normal 6 o'clock start time like tonight to a 4 to 6. And the idea was that it would be more attractive to have more students participate. Do you think that that would be the case if we had our 4 to 6 o'clock meeting, that we'd get more student participation?
Yeah, I think that would help a lot because sometimes it's hard to make it here because I mean, you're going till like 8, 9, depending on how much you have to go over. And then that affects your like the next day and then your whole week of like your workload of school, especially when it comes to the end. Just using this as an example, when it comes to the end of the school year, there's so much like cramming in right now and everything. And then when you have everything lined up, that I think that if you have the 4 to 6, it would attract not only like the members, but also other people, like how he was saying about having other people represent certain committees if they are like qualified and if like they're consulted with us first. I think that would definitely attract more students.
So you're saying you're going to go home and do your homework then tonight?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that feedback. All right. Any other questions on 441? Thank you very much, Melissa. Appreciate all of your work and your team's work that went into this. All right. Last but not least, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.